Your hand moves before your mind decides. You feel the phone in your pocket. You pull it out. Nothing happened. No message. No notification. You check anyway. This isn't a habit you built. It's a habit you inherited. Your brain is not broken. It's ancient, and it's doing exactly what it was built to do in a world it was never built for. To understand what's happening in your pocket, you have to go back. Not to the invention of the smartphone, not even to the invention of writing. You have to go back 2 million years to a hominid standing at the edge of a grassland, deciding whether to check behind that rock. That hominid didn't know what was behind the rock. Could be nothing, could be a root vegetable worth digging up, could be a predator. The uncertainty itself was the point. An animal that already knew what was behind every rock had no reason to explore. An animal that didn't know had every reason to look. The ones who looked, who stayed curious, who kept checking, survived slightly more often than the ones who didn't. Over hundreds of thousands of generations, that tiny survival edge became wired into you. This is called information foraging. Your ancestors weren't just foraging for food, they were foraging for knowledge. Where is the water this season? Which berries turned out to be poisonous? Did the group 2 valleys over find better hunting ground? Every scrap of new information was a potential advantage, and your brain evolved a reward system to make sure you kept collecting it. That reward system runs on a chemical you've heard of, but probably misunderstand: dopamine. You've been told dopamine is the pleasure chemical. It's not. Neuroscientist Wolfram Schultz spent decades recording individual dopamine neurons in the brains of animals, and what he found changed how we understand desire itself. Dopamine doesn't spike when you get a reward. It spikes when a reward is uncertain. It spikes hardest in the gap between not knowing and finding out. Schultz called this a prediction error. Your brain is constantly predicting what will happen next, and when reality surprises it, in a good way, dopamine floods the system. Not to reward you for what you have, to push you toward what you don't have yet. Sit with that for a second. The chemical driving you is not a pleasure chemical, it's a seeking chemical. It doesn't care about satisfaction, it cares about the next unknown. There's a reason this seeking system had to be this powerful. Think about the actual cost of exploration for your ancestors. Walking toward an unknown sound in tall grass could get you killed. Wandering away from the group to check a new water source could mean days without food if it turned out to be dry. Exploration was expensive and often dangerous. So evolution didn't just give your ancestors a mild curiosity, it gave them a compulsion strong enough to override caution. Strong enough to make the risk of checking feel more urgent than the comfort of staying put. A weak curiosity would have been outcompeted by fear. Only a drive powerful enough to override fear could reliably get a hominid to leave the safety of the group and find the next water source, the next hunting ground, the next patch of edible roots. That's the scale of what you're carrying around. Not a mild preference for novelty, a compulsion strong enough to have once overridden your ancestors' fear of predators. There's also a social layer to this that matters just as much as the environmental one. Anthropologists studying small-scale foraging societies have long noted how central information exchange was for daily survival. Knowing which family group had good relations with the next valley over, knowing who was trustworthy and who wasn't, knowing what had shifted in the social hierarchy since the last gathering. This wasn't gossip for its own sake, it was survival intelligence. A person who was current on social information could form better alliances, avoid conflict, and access resources through relationships. A person who was socially out of date was vulnerable. So your brain didn't just evolve to crave information about the physical world, it evolved to crave information about other people specifically. Who likes you, who's talking about you, what you missed while you weren't paying attention. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable. In the 1950s, a psychologist named B.F. Skinner ran an experiment that decades later would explain why you can't put your phone down. Skinner and his colleague Charles Furster placed pigeons in a box with a lever. Press the lever, get food. Simple enough. But they didn't just test one reward pattern, they tested several. Give the pigeon food every fifth press, like clockwork, and the pigeon presses steadily, then rests, satisfied, knowing exactly when the next reward is coming. But make the reward random, sometimes the third press, sometimes the ninth, sometimes the first, and something strange happens. The pigeon doesn't rest, it can't rest. It presses over and over, thousands of times an hour, chasing a pattern that isn't there. And when Skinner stopped delivering food altogether, the pigeons on the random schedule kept pressing 4 times longer than the ones on the predictable schedule before they finally gave up. This is called a variable ratio reward schedule, and it is, without exaggeration, one of the most powerful behavioral forces ever documented in a laboratory. It's the exact mechanism behind slot machines. Pull the lever, maybe you win, maybe you don't. You can never predict which, so you never stop pulling. What made Skinner and Furster's findings so striking wasn't just that the pigeons pressed more, it's how differently they behaved compared to every other group. Pigeons on a fixed schedule worked like clock punchers, steady, then a pause, then steady again, because they knew exactly what was coming and when. But the pigeons on the unpredictable schedule showed no such rhythm. Some recorded rates reached over 10,000 presses in a single hour. There was no natural stopping point because the pigeon's brain had no way to calculate when enough was enough. Without a predictable pattern, there was no signal telling it to rest. The only way to know if the next press would pay off was to press it. That's not a quirk of pigeon psychology. That's a fundamental property of how reward-driven brains handle uncertainty, and it shows up nearly identically in humans. It's why gamblers describe losing track of time at a slot machine. It's why a near miss on a scratch card feels almost as compelling as a win. And it's why you can look up from your phone and realize 40 minutes have disappeared with no memory of deciding to spend them that way. Now think about your phone. You pull it out of your pocket. Maybe there's a message, maybe there's a like, maybe there's nothing at all. You can never predict which, so you never stop pulling. Your phone is not a tool that happens to be addictive. For a huge portion of what you do on it, it is, structurally, a slot machine. Every app that shows you a feed, every platform with a notification batch, every scroll that might reveal something interesting is running the same variable ratio schedule that kept Skinner's pigeons pecking a lever until their bodies gave out. This isn't an accident. It is designed deliberately by people who understand Skinner's research better than most psychology students do. Because keeping you uncertain keeps you checking, and keeping you checking is the entire business model.
But here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. This system wasn't built for you. It was built for a hominid on a grassland checking behind a rock. It was built for a world where new information was rare, valuable, and often meant the difference between eating and starving, between safety and danger. In that world, an insatiable appetite for the unknown was a gift. It made you sharper. It kept you alive. You are still running that same appetite, except now, instead of information arriving every few days in the form of a new hunting ground or a warning from a neighboring group, it arrives every second, engineered specifically to trigger the same ancient circuitry. Your brain has no way of telling the difference between a genuinely important discovery and a stranger's vacation photo. To your dopamine system, uncertainty is uncertainty. A notification you can't predict fires the same seeking response as a rustle in the grass that might be a predator. This is why willpower alone rarely works. You're not fighting a bad habit. You're fighting 2 million years of finely tuned survival architecture, and it's currently being aimed at you by people whose job is to keep you engaged for as long as possible. Consider the pull to refresh gesture. You drag a page down, it snaps back, and new content loads. That motion wasn't chosen by accident. It mimics the physical action of a slot machine lever, and it was designed that way on purpose by engineers who studied behavioral psychology before they wrote a single line of code. The infinite scroll works the same way. There's no natural stopping point built into the feed, no bottom of the page, because a stopping point would give your brain a moment to ask whether it actually wants to keep going. Every design choice that feels like a small convenience, autoplay, red notification badges, the 3 dots that show someone is typing, exists because it recreates some version of uncertainty, and uncertainty is what keeps the seeking system engaged. Even the color red matters here. It's not neutral. Human vision evolved to treat red as an urgent signal, ripe fruit, blood, danger, something worth immediate attention. Notification badges are red for the same reason a predator's markings might once have caught your ancestor's eye across a clearing. Your visual system was never given the chance to decide whether a red dot on an app icon deserves urgency. It just responds the same way it always has. There's a researcher worth mentioning here, too. Behavioral scientists studying digital engagement have repeatedly found that unpredictability, not frequency, is what drives compulsive checking. It's not that you get too many notifications, it's that you can never know when the next one is coming or what it will be. Remove the unpredictability and the compulsion weakens dramatically, which tells you something important. This was never really about the content on your screen, it was about the uncertainty of what might be there. There's an irony worth sitting with, too. The more advanced the technology gets, the more it seems to reach backward, not forward, into the oldest parts of your brain. You'd think a device this sophisticated would speak to the newest, most rational part of your mind, the part that plans, that reasons, that weighs long-term costs against short-term pleasure. Instead, the most successful apps in the world speak almost entirely to the oldest part, the part that evolved before language, before agriculture, before your species had a name for itself. They don't need to convince you, they just need to trigger you. So what do you actually do with this? You can't switch off 2 million years of evolution, but you can stop blaming yourself for something that was never a personal failure to begin with. The urge to check is not weakness, it's an ancient survival tool, misfiring in an environment engineered to exploit it. What you can change is the shape of the uncertainty around you. Turn off badges and the reward stops arriving on a random schedule because you control when you look. Move the apps with infinite feeds off your home screen and you remove the rock you keep checking behind out of habit rather than need. Give your seeking system somewhere else to go, a new skill, a physical challenge, a real conversation, something with the kind of meaningful unpredictability your ancestors were actually built to chase, instead of the manufactured kind sitting in your pocket. Because that hominid on the grassland wasn't wrong to check behind the rock. Checking kept the species alive. The problem was never the checking, it's that somewhere along the way, someone built a rock that never stops calling you back, whether or not there's anything behind it at all. Tonight, your phone will buzz, or maybe it won't, and your hand will move before your mind decides. When it does, you'll know exactly what's happening. Not a flaw, not weakness, just a 2-million-year-old survival instinct, reaching for a rock that was built to never satisfy it.